In this video, I'm going to show you 3 filmmaking concepts that you need to understand if you want to fly like a professional filmmaker. Number 1, creating suspense. You want to engage your viewer, draw them in, and give them a reason to keep watching. Create suspense. Don't lay all your cards out on the table in the first frame. The second concept is understanding your light source, the sun, how to use it to your advantage, what to do in different circumstances, how to make the most of any given situation. The third concept is creating depth in your shot. Moving images are a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional world. We want to create as much interest as possible in that shot by creating layers, understanding the foreground, the midground and the background to create a 3-dimensional, interesting shot. Hello, I'm Stewart CARROLL and this is Drone Film Guide, the channel where we learn to fly like filmmakers. Now, in a previous video, I outlined 5 basic shots that would allow you to fly like a professional filmmaker without any pilot skill whatsoever. But what was key was that there was some basic understanding of filmmaking in those shots, as opposed to an advanced understanding of what to do with your thumbs when you're flying the drone. One of the threads running through that video, if you were paying attention, is that you don't need to lay all your cards out on the table in the first frame. You can create some suspense by revealing your subject or your environment later in the shot. It keeps the viewer watching, it draws you in, and it helps tell a story. Now, I'm not going to give you a shot list. This is not about doing this way, or whatever the case may be. Just understand that point. You can do it by tilting up, you can do it by sliding in from the side, you can do it by rising up from behind a tree. There's innumerable ways of doing this, and we're going to look at some examples now to help you better understand what I mean. So let's look at an extreme example of the big reveal. We're just looking down the valley here, and then before your very eyes, there's a couple standing in the middle of the road. You weren't expecting that. We've told a story. Now, surely we're not just looking at the ground here. Of course not. We're tilting up and we're showing these beautiful mountains in the background. We didn't just show them in the first frame. We revealed them. We created some suspense. Same kind of idea here. This is a nice shot. You know, it's all very attractive, but in come the trees. This seems to be going somewhere, and then there we go. We're revealing the subject of the shot in this case, and it's this nice old church. Doesn't matter how you reveal things. This is a simple slide to the right and tilt up. We have a reveal of this country house. You can reveal your subject in so many ways. Again, surely we're not just showing you a shot of the ground here. That doesn't really make any sense. No, of course we're not. We're tilting up and we're revealing Glen Shee this is, looking down the valley. Again here, they're not just showing us grass. That's boring. Why would anyone do that? Into the frame come a couple. We've revealed the subjects. This is an interesting one. So straight away we see the subject, in this case Alina, standing on a rock. Now we see what she's looking at. The reveal has been the landscape in the background. Complete opposite concept here. We see the background. Now we see Alina. That took us by surprise. And finally, down we come and again we reveal our subject, Alina, just sitting there on the rock. Filmmaking concept number 2, understanding light. Now, for drone pilots, we're quite lucky because we only really have one light source in 99.999% of our shots, and that's the sun. Unfortunately, however, we don't have control over that light source, so we have to understand what to do in certain environments to create certain moods, or if we just have to give up that day and come back another day if it's important, or imagine you don't have that luxury because you have a deadline to meet or because you're filming an event which is only taking place on that day. The first thing you should really be doing when you get on site and you're thinking about what kind of shots you want to do is looking at that sun and trying to understand how that's going to influence the footage that you create that day, and potentially even think all the way through to the editing process as to how you're going to incorporate those shots into the bigger picture as and when you get around to editing the footage. Let's take a look at some of the ways that we need to understand the sun and how we can use it to our advantage to get better footage. The sun has such a powerful role to play in defining the look of a shot. Here you can see this building with no sunlight on it. It looks kind of flat. Here it is with the sunlight. It's like someone turned the light on. It looks absolutely fantastic. Now, it depends, of course, on what kind of look you're trying to create. This is another quite good example here. We're looking down the plateau in Crete. It looks a bit flat. Here the sun is turned on and it looks absolutely amazing. 90% of the time you're probably going to prefer the look with the sun out or using it to your advantage. Now, as a different concept, pointing the camera at the sun. Look at that blown out sky. I personally don't like that. I don't think that's a good look. For one thing, you might get prop flicker, as you can see here, depending on what kind of drone you're flying, and you really don't want that. Now the issue is the cameras that we have on these kind of consumer, prosumer level drones really don't have the dynamic range to handle pointing straight at the sun. That's the trade-off, or the transition between the highlights and the shadows. It's a bit harsh. Look at this when you just turn the drone around and all of a sudden pointing away from the sun, you've got this nice vivid image, well-balanced exposures of the sky and the landscape. Of course you can point at the sun when it's a sunset. Look at this, it looks absolutely amazing. As long as the sun's low enough, it doesn't overpower the shot and look a bit ugly. With low sun, look at the shadows that you can create there. It creates this dramatic depth. The shadows actually create the depth in the shot, which is much more interesting. And on here you can see the shadows dancing on the ground, again adding to the three-dimensional nature of that shot. Filmmaking concept number 3, creating depth in your shot. Now, as we said in the introduction, video is a two-dimensional medium, but we're representing a three-dimensional world in that. And one of the ways that we create depth is by layering an image with foreground, midground, and background elements. Now, in some cases, it's quite difficult to do with aerial footage because you're potentially miles away from your subject and you might not have something in the foreground. You'll probably have something in your background in the form of, I don't know, trees or mountains or clouds or whatever the case may be. Foreground's a little bit harder to do, but when you get on site, look for things that you can get in between the subject and your camera and create some of that depth. You'll see what I mean in these examples. Now this is what we're talking about, creating depth. Look at the sense of motion that flying through these trees gives you in this shot. You've got foreground, midground and background. The midground here is really the house, and that's our subject. This is another example. We're kind of sliding in from behind the tree on the right hand side and revealing the house. Again, a less extreme example, but the trees create that sense of motion and depth. It's much more interesting than just seeing the house. And here's another example of exactly the same thing. We have a three-dimensional image. Combining the creation of depth with the notion of creating suspense and producing a reveal, we can get some pretty good effects here, as you can see there on the castle, and on this one we've created depth and we've revealed the couple standing on the steps. It's a really cool look. So those were 3 filmmaking concepts to help you get more out of your drone footage and really take your aerial cinematography to the next level. These concepts are applicable not only to what we do, but also to photography, to filmmaking of any discipline. And the masters of cinematography understand these concepts and use them to incredibly powerful effects. So why shouldn't we? Just because we're dealing with Phantoms or Mavics or whatever the case may be, we want to fly like filmmakers and get the most out of what we're doing. As always, leave your comments below, let me know what you're thinking. Don't forget to subscribe because we've got lots more videos on the way, and you'll hear from us soon here at Drone Film Guide.